Okay, hi. We're going to be talking about a little bit about television news writing. We have got into broadcast news writing last time, and that's mainly having to do kind of at the basic level with radio. All of that really applies to television news writing as well, but we add uh, some aspects in television news writing to what we discussed about broadcast news writing and radio news writing in particular. So there's a video here. I don't know how helpful this may be. If you want to have a look at that, do. I would pick it up about 3 minutes in, give some explanation about television news writing, but we have some other videos that we'll look at here. So let the picture tell the story. Obviously, there have to be some words, but the words are used to clarify items that are not obvious from the video. You don't want to say literally, here we see, because you're stating the obvious. In all media writing, we don't want to state the obvious. If the viewer can see it for himself, or the listener can hear it for himself or herself, then we don't need to say that. So we try to avoid stating the obvious, but we may refer to what we see in the video just to confirm what the person is seeing. But the pictures drive the story in television writing. The pictures come first, and the writing is done so that it relates to the video. View the video before writing the story. The video drives the story, which I just said, but you don't want to write a story and then try to match video to that. You pick your video first, and we're not going to be shooting video in this class, but it's still useful to know that. You select the shots that you're going to use first, and then, at least if nothing else in your mind, construct a sequence of those shots and how you're going to construct the story, and then write to that video and the shots that you have selected. The words must match the video. It's easier to change the words than video. If you write about something that's not in the video, that's confusing to the viewer. I think there's a reference to this later in this outline, but there's something called see and say. And so if the viewer sees a truck, then you should make reference to a truck or the truck. If the viewer sees a tree for whatever reason, then you should make reference to the tree. You don't want to say, here we see a tree. Here we see a truck. You make reference to, you mention the truck, you mention the tree, so that the viewer remains oriented to what you're showing the viewer, and the words match up with the pictures. Identify people shown in stories quickly. Don't leave viewers guessing, who's that? So if we see the mayor standing at a podium speaking, again, we don't want to say, here is the mayor speaking at a podium, not stating the obvious, but we mention his name. If it was commerce, as we speak, Mayor Wyman Williams says the city is about to start a new street improvement program, and we say his name as we see him. Okay, all of the broadcast style guidelines we've been discussing for radio apply to TV news writing. You do have broadcast style summary and guidelines in My Leo 2DL, and you need to refer to that in doing any assignments having to do with broadcast news writing, and in particular television news writing. Also, and this would apply also to radio, but in particular now to television, when writing to a soundbite, which for television is called an SOT, and that stands for sound on tape, even though we don't use tape really very much anymore, you still must have a lead-in or a setup to the SOT that tells the person, tells the viewer who is speaking and what the person is talking about. So as we see the mayor speaking at the podium, we would say, Mayor Wyman Williams says the city is about to start a new street improvement program. And then the SOT begins, and he tells you more specifically about that street improvement program. He says, we plan to spend $5 million over the next year to improve the streets, and this is coming from a bond issue, and he tells you more about it in the SOT, but in the lead-in or the setup, then we need to explain who is speaking and generally what he's or she is speaking about. So I'm gonna, there's another video here that you may find helpful. It's just someone talking, and there's nothing wrong with that, but in the interest of making the best use of time, I think I'm gonna show you this one. And this is pretty general. It gets into more than just writing, but that's okay because it's hard to divorce writing from everything else that goes on in producing a television news story or a streaming video news story. I'm going to pause this just for a moment. I should have done this before. I'm going to raise the volume here so you can hear it a lot better. And then also to avoid some problems with double audio, I am going to plug in my little earbuds here. So now I can hear and you can hear, and we're all much better off. So here we go.
On Winnell, every week the reporters produce a news package. This is simply the whole news story that includes video footage, voiceovers, interviews, and usually a piece to camera. Firstly, the reporter must keep their editor informed of what story they are working on. This usually takes place on Monday at Winnell, and it allows the editor to understand any editorial issues they might have with the story. To construct a news package, we need to get good pictures. Here at Winnell, we either use a DSLR camera or a JVC camera, and you must remember to use a tripod to avoid those shaky shots. In terms of how good you are with your filming does come down to experience, but there are simple things we can make sure that we can get right before we go out to film. And number one is to check that your equipment works.
So again, now this is coming out of Great Britain, obviously, but they operate in a very similar way to the way we operate in the U.S. as far as producing all sorts of news, in particular television news. But notice here again the emphasis on the video. Now, the writing is important. In television, the audio is 50% of the story. You have audio and you have video. And of course, with the audio, that comes from very often a script as well as sound bites and natural sound. So the writing is very important, but in television, yes, the video comes first.
When filming on location, make sure you film as much as possible when you are there. There is nothing worse than coming back to the newsroom to find you don't have enough footage to do your voiceover, to tell your story. Also, film in sequences. These are basically filming the same thing at 3 different angles. So firstly, you would film your wide angle shot. Then you would film up closer and then closer again. This gives you enough footage to voiceover and to edit with. Try to think about what you want your opening shot to be, as this will be the one that will grab your viewer's attention. Sometimes the best opening shot is one with the best natural sound, so make sure you get some natural sound on the tape too. You obviously need to get interviews to make your news story a story. Obviously, a lot of news stories will involve conflict, but make sure you interview both sides of the party to get balance. When you're out filming your interview, make sure you get some GVs. These are basically shots of your interviewee doing something, like typing or walking with you. These allow you to do your voiceover and to put on top of your interview.
And we refer to that sort of thing as B-roll footage. I think I used that term in previous video. It's the cutaway video, if you will, that will be seen while the reporter is, whether it's a live anchor person or whether it's a field reporter doing the narration of the story.
Sometimes the reporter may want to add a piece to camera. This simply is the reporter talking to the camera, what usually would have been a voiceover.
We would typically call that a stand-up, and most packages that are produced, we'll talk about packages here in a moment or two, almost every package will have a stand-up, the reporter speaking directly into the camera.
Make sure that you get your piece to cameras as natural as possible. Sometimes by walking, that may help. The reporter will come back to the newsroom to edit their package. We edit our packages on Final Cut Pro. So simply import all of your footage onto a new event on Final Cut Pro. Then open a new project and edit together your sequence of shots that you have just captured. Insert your interview, and remember that we only need about 10-second grab quotes of this interview, and then add some final footage to the end of your package to voiceover. And finally, you will need to record your voiceover. This is the important part of telling your story, so you need to make sure you get this right. The quality of sound is important, so use the radio studio to record your voiceover.
So what she is saying here is that, again, it's the pictures that come first. And she has not really discussed writing, but obviously to do a voiceover, that has to be written. You don't ad-lib that. I'm ad-libbing right now, and I just stopped and went, which is not so good for a finished product television news story. So you would write the story, but you put the video sequence together, including the sound bites, and then you add, lastly, you add your narration, which would come from the script that you would have written. Just a few more seconds of this.
Speaking slowly will usually help give you good pace.
Okay, so there's a lot to learn there, and it really relates to writing, although it's not specifically about writing, but you do see the sequence that typically is followed in putting together a television news story. So some types of TV news stories, and I have a link here to Fox 4 TV News in Dallas, and I don't think I'm going to play any stories for you here, but certainly you can go to this link on your own and view some of these stories, the recent stories that they have done, and learn more about how a television news piece is put together. And I would say to you, and I've said this before, you learn more from observing than anything else. And if you're interested in doing this for a career, you really should be paying attention to how television news stories are written and how they're presented. Same with radio, and same with anything else. You'll learn more from your own observation and your keen and very focused observation than I can teach you, real frankly. So types of television news stories. You have readers. We discussed this in the first outline having to do with mostly with radio news. This has no soundbite, SOT for television terminology. Might have a graphic for television, but basically this is a story that is read live by an anchor person with no other, no video, no B-roll, no soundbite, and that's all. So voiceovers in television these are stories where the announcer or the anchor person reads a script over an edited video sequence, what we also call B-roll. There is no other audio, but it's just the anchor person looking into the camera and reading the story live, but the viewer sees video that has been shot related to the story. VOSOTs the announcer reads a script over the video sequence. This is exactly the same as the voiceover story we were talking about just a moment ago, but it has an SOT or a sound bite also included in that story, but it is read live by the anchor person. And then a package is pre-recorded. This is a VOSOT basically that is pre-recorded, typically by the field reporter, person who went out and covered the story, with an intro for the anchor. So the anchor has to have something to tell the viewer what this story you're about to see is about, briefly. And then the package is played, the pre-recorded story is played, and the viewer sees and hears the story. And then there's a lockout at the end where the reporter gives his or her name and the station ID at the end of the package. All right. So pictures tell the story as much as the words do. Watch the story in the link here. I'm playing it for you now. If you were looking at this on your own, then I would want you to play this. This is just a very simple little TV news package, but notice how the pictures are used to tell the story here.
See, there's the hail damage from a week ago, and it's scabbed over, and there's nothing wrong with that peach. All you do is you just, cut that off right there. It's fine below it.
Whether as we all...
So what is this story about? It's about peaches. And it's about some storms that have caused problems for the peach crop in this particular area. This is somewhere on the East Coast. And now we see the peach trees, and you will notice as the story goes along, she will refer at some point to these trees. And as we see the farmer that she's talking to, she will say his name. So this is the see and say aspect that I was talking about here a few moments ago.
all know can be unpredictable, and it's one thing that can make or break a farmer's business. Take Paul Saunders, for instance.
So we see the gentleman for the first time, and she says, take Paul Saunders, for instance. She doesn't say, here is Farmer Paul Saunders. She just said, take Paul Saunders, and as we see him. And so now we know who is that man there. Of course, this is the reporter that he's talking to. We know his name is Paul Saunders.
He wasn't sure what he would see when the storm was over.
Up here, and he was already checking them, and he was showing me them, and I was like, oh, no.
This is the storm that tore through central Virginia last weekend, dropping quarter-sized hail and making its mark on Saunders' crops.
Well, we've been very fortunate to have missed a lot of these storms.
Saunders' biggest concern wasn't the hailstorm, but the wind it brought with it. He says once the peaches hit the ground, they're done.
We don't ever mess with them after that. They're for the...
And you see, she says, once the peaches hit the ground, and she picks one up off the ground at that moment.
The raccoons and the whatever to eat after that.
Besides the storm, there was another reason the Saunders family didn't expect to produce a crop.
And he said, you know, I'll be surprised if we have a peach crop this year, because he was expecting.
Her lead-in says there was another reason why the Saunders family didn't expect to produce a crop. That's the setup or the lead-in to the soundbite. So she tells you what he's going to talk about, and then he talks about it. I've pulled this back just a little bit to kind of see, so you can see again what I'm talking about.
Because he was expecting a April frost, like we normally have, but we didn't have it.
Some irony to this story, an early picking season, 1 month early in fact.
My father is 78 years old. He says he's never picked a peach that early.
That was not the one I intended to show you, but that is a good example too. Irony about this particular crop, and then he adds, well, my father said he never has picked a peach this early. Let me see if I can time that again to show you.
Season, 1 month early in fact.
My father is 78 years old. He says he's never picked a peach that early.
Okay, so you can watch this again for yourself, but all of the elements that we've been talking about are in this little simple story. and the reporter did a nice job of putting that story together. But the pictures, you really are able to understand most of this story by seeing the pictures. You see the peaches, you see some of the damage to the peaches, you see some video of the storm that caused the trouble. You have the sound bites or the SOTs with the farmer throughout there, and she has lead-ins or setups to those SOTs all along, where she kind of gives you a little bit of a idea about what to expect that he's going to say, and then he says it and he adds to what she said in the lead-in. And of course, all of the planning that went into putting that story together is very much what you saw in the previous video. Nicole Osea is a friend of mine who's now in radio news, and she has an excellent audition reel, which you'd learn a lot from looking at her audition reel. I'm not going to play this for you, but I would encourage you to watch that. Her full-length story start at 6:26 there, but you learn a lot about putting together a television news story and also how to put together an audition reel. And Nicole has done quite well, and she's now with WBAP Radio in Dallas-Fort Worth. Support the video with words that fill in the blanks. This is basically what we've been talking about with the words support the video. Television news scripts are written in a 2-column format. Now this is important. Video and audio commands are on the left, and the script, the words that the announcer speaks, is on the right. So I'm going to show you an example here in a moment. Notice how in the following script, video and audio commands on the left correspond to the beginning of a sentence in the script on the right. So this is a simple TV VOSOT script, and what we have here are the instructions. Oops, it's not going to let me highlight. This is a PDF, so it won't let me select areas, but you can watch the arrow here. You have the technical directions here on the left, and you have the script on the right. And in each case, you have a direction beginning as that sentence starts. So take VO, start the voiceover, and we're going to play. Here we're going to play the video sequence or the B-roll here while the anchor person is reading this copy here. These words in the script here. Here it says take SOT, start the SOT at this point, and over here on the right-hand side of the script, it says SOT. We see the in cue, the first word spoken in the SOT, and the out cue, the last word spoken in the SOT. What is seen here on the right is what the anchor person will see on a teleprompter. And these are the words that will go past the anchor's eyes on the teleprompter. And then down here it says take VO, meaning we're going to resume really that voiceover, that video sequence. And the anchor person will read the remainder of the story. So it's important that we space these things on the left out, and that their position indicates where in the story they happen. It's important not to push all of these things together so that we can't see where each of these instructions should take place in the story. So we go down the page item by item in this TV VOSOT script. This is something I will put that script up for you also by itself in content of MyLeo 2DL. I'll also put this up. This will tell you how to set up your Microsoft Word document to do a 2-column script so that you can go back and forth from the left column to the right column. This might be very useful to you. There's other uses for this. But you'll follow this to do an assignment of television news writing. All right? All right, so that's a bit of an overview of TV news writing, and you'll have an assignment to do, and we'll see you next time.